Chambers hospitality, but this is our third tour stop on our TecNation tour, really highlighting the benefits of technology for both small businesses as well as for government. And my name is Jordan Crenshaw, Vice President of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Technology Engagement Center. Today we're going to hear about two things I mentioned, the importance of tech for small business and the importance of modernizing government IT. And this falls after the release of two reports that we did at the U.S. Chamber, really highlighting the benefits of tech platforms for small businesses. We released a report that actually showed that small businesses that use tech actually contribute 99 million jobs to the U.S. economy, as well as $17 trillion to the economy total. We actually surveyed small businesses. The vast majority of those who use tech platforms during the COVID-19 pandemic were actually able to see increased sales, increased hiring, and one of the key stats we learned is that 80% of small businesses said that tech helps them compete with larger companies, and 80% also said if they lost access to things like data, it would harm their ability to compete and continue their operations. But a few things, we actually had some specific Washington State numbers. 74% of small businesses in Washington State said that they would struggle to survive without the use of technology, whether that's payment apps, delivery, digital advertising. 75% actually said they were able to better compete here in Washington State. And finally, tech using small businesses in state are actually contributing 1.9 million jobs to the economy and $343 billion in economic output. So those are not small numbers, and I think it's key that we get good tech policies in place. We're going to talk about that as well. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about modernizing government. We released a report this year that showed the fact that Congress has not helped digitize government. Is now costing taxpayers $100 billion. And we really want to see government invest in modernizing its systems, whether it be on a federal or state level. And who better, we thought, to have this conversation here in Tacoma would be to have Congressman Kilmer, who has done a great job leading the Congressional Modernization Committee, and actually just had a report come out over the last few weeks. So excellent work, Congressman. And we also have Bill Kehoe, who's the state CIO. So I think these are really two individuals who can speak really well to the need for modernization in government. To introduce the Congressman, though, he represents the 6th District, and as I mentioned, led the Congressional Modernization Committee. He served in Olympia in the House and Senate before being elected to the U.S. House in 2012.
First of all, I just want to say thanks to the Chamber. Andrea and her team do an awesome job, and I see my friend Chris from the AWB here as well. Thank you for your leadership, and to the U.S. Chamber, who's been a terrific partner to me and to my team. And to every business owner, business leader in this room, thank you. My background was working in economic development before I got to Congress. It always made me grumpy when elected officials failed to say thank you to employers. So I want to say thank you to every employer in the room for what you do. Gets a whole lot better when folks are working, and I think that really is depends on those of you in this room. So thank you for that too. When I started in this job, it was with really two goals in mind. One, trying to have an economy that works better for people, and two, having a government that works better as well. I grew up in Port Angeles when the timber industry kind of took it on the chin, and saw a lot of my friends' parents lose their jobs, a lot of my neighbors lose their jobs, and for me, it's been really a mission to try to make sure that no matter what zip code you live in, you just got a shot economically. And a lot of that runs right through our small business community, making sure that our small businesses are able to grow and be successful and keep their lights on, particularly in the face of some of the challenges that we've had in recent years. And then on that second piece, I did not come to Congress thinking I was going to chair a committee called the Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress, which makes us sound like we were the IT help desk. We were nicknamed the Fix Congress Committee, which usually, after I say that, people offer to either pray for me or they giggle. But very quietly, we were able to make now more than 200 recommendations focused on making Congress work better. A lot of those recommendations were related to how Congress uses technology. And I'm on the schedule for later to talk a little bit more about that. But I will just say Congress has been described as an 18th century institution using 20th century technology to solve 21st century problems. I found that to be pretty true, and later in the program I'll give you a run through of some of those examples. But the opening attraction here is Bill Kehoe, who's the Chief Information Officer for the state of Washington. Bill, I think it'd be useful to maybe just kick things off by talking a little bit about your role and what that means for the business community here. And specifically, as we saw state government have to pivot during the pandemic, how did your job change as a consequence of COVID?
Great. Well, it's great to be here as well. Thank you for the chamber and good to see all of you. So I've been at the state as the CIO for about a year and a half. Before that, I was CIO for Los Angeles County, and the largest county in the country, and also King County, Washington as well. So I have a lot of local government ties and experiences that I bring to the state. So my role as the state CIO, I'm in charge of technology policy, strategy, and enterprise services, both on the security side and on the network and telephony, and those enterprise services that are common to all state agencies. And I'm also the what we call the Washington Technology Solutions, WATEC, director of that agency. And as I said, we're responsible for strategy, policy, and enterprise services, security, GIS, and a lot of those enterprise type programs. And I just want to mention a couple of the things that I am really passionate about that we're leaning into as a state, because I think through the pandemic, what we saw, especially with technology and government, is that we can be innovative and we can move fast because we were forced to do that. And a lot of the innovations were around giving information around where COVID was happening and the infection rates, and then more information and solutions around the vaccine, when it was available, hospital bed availability, things like that. Those solutions were, out of urgency, created quickly. And so what we're trying to do is capitalize on that, take that innovation, take that speed to market that really helps all of our residents and businesses, and then use that and move forward in that same manner. Because traditionally, because of procurement laws and everything else, we have moved very slow to modernize. So one of the things that we're really leaning into is this concept of connecting government horizontally instead of vertically, because governments have been traditionally very siloed and within their own agency silos, where data siloed, systems are siloed, and then how we outreach to the public has been very siloed. And then turn that to be a horizontal connection in our government so that we can then present a front door to businesses and to residents in how they engage with government and make that experience much more efficient than it is today. So we have a resident portal that we're looking at. It's funded in the governor's budget. We're going to be reaching out to communities and businesses to help us build that. An identity and access management system so we can personalize the experience coming in and make that experience efficient and engaging. And then the use of GIS and other technologies around that. So our strategies now are a lot more outward, external facing to the communities and to residents and businesses. And that's our focus as we modernize. We want to make sure that we're modernizing and we're actually making that experience with our residents much more efficient and engaging. So,
are there particular projects that your office has worked on that you're particularly proud of?
Yes, I think we're putting, as I said, the resident portal is the project right now that we're starting that I'm most proud of, because it really represents the new wave of how we need to engage our residents, and it's external versus internal. I think we have a great GIS program as well, and that's a technology that's underused. And then we're also leaning in a lot more on data, because we realize that the data is important to you and access to that data. So open data portal where you can have access to public data in government, that should also potentially drive economic development. So we have a very good open data program that we're expanding as well. And we're trying to connect our government through data, through the sharing of data across government, and then sharing that also with you as well. So data, our resident portal, our GIS program, and then another big initiative is our broadband office in our Commerce Department. One of the real tragedies is that we still have households that don't have access to the internet. And the opportunity is in the inequity of that is something that we're really leaning into as a state. So we do have a broadband office. We have monies to build the middle mile and also connect more with the households. But that's a real priority with our governor and our state, is to lean into that area so that we can connect those households that don't have access to broadband. So that's another really important area.
I think it'd be interesting if you could say a little bit more about the open data stuff. So I worked on this at the congressional level with a bill called the Open Government Data Act, which got passed as part of a broader bill around evidence-based policymaking. And the sort of theory of the case was, one, that the data that agencies have is your data. I mean, it's information that, with the exception of your personal private information, should be available. So for example, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, keeps data on waves. Turns out if you want to download the coolest surfer app on your iPhone, that is NOAA data, and it's driving economic development, it's driving innovation. There are entities out there that are trying to look at how to spend government dollars, your dollars, more efficiently, using some of that data, kind of crunching those numbers and seeing where we're getting the most bang for the buck. We now have a presumption at the federal level of openness with regard to that data. So any of your businesses, any nonprofit, anyone who's trying to drive more government efficiency will have access to that information. Again, your personal information would remain private, but information about how those programs work is now made available, or data collected around everything from waves and weather information to social service information is now publicly available. So talk about how that works at the state level. Is there a presumption of openness? How can citizens and businesses access that information?
There is not, we're working towards that, but I think that's one of the things we have to work on. Our agencies at the state, they're stewards of your data, and they're very protective of that because we don't want data breaches, especially of personal information.
Yeah.
However, the data that is public, we need to put it in our open data portal in one place where it's easy to access. And the states and the governments that have been successful in that have really driven business startups and economic development, because businesses can use that data and get innovative around how to use that to drive their businesses and their startups. So that's where we want to go. We have a long way to do that, because it's not the agency's data, it's your data, as you said, it's our residents' data. And we got to be able to give that back to them so that they can utilize that in a much more effective manner and for economic development. So I own the open data program. We have a chief data officer we just hired, and we want to make that much more robust within an overall data strategy for the state. But we also, here's where we've missed the mark, is that we haven't reached out enough, and whether it's open data or resident portal or others, to you to find out what's not working and where do we need to improve. And we're gonna lean into that area much more and get out into communities and talk to you what you need. What kind of data do you want access to? We haven't done that in the past, and I think we need to get better at that.
I'm conscious of the fact that government is not always at the cutting edge. When I got to Congress, just as an example, in 2013, the first piece of equipment that I was given was a pager. I literally had no idea what I was being handed. So talk about some of the impediments that you see at the state level to modernizing our technology system.
I'm involved with a lot of modernized projects right now. Our 30, 40-year-old mainframe system that was our finance system, we're modernizing to Workday. So you can imagine, the green screens and the data structures and the generations of technology that we're now moving away from into a modern ERP solution, cloud solution, where we're not coding, we're configuring, and yet the system is critical to us. It processes invoices, our budgets, and everything else. Those are very complex modernizations, and one of the challenges we have is our resources in technology and in the business. They've spent their careers on this type of technology, and that transition is difficult. And so we are really utilizing that public-private partnership to get those skills and those resources in-house so we can make these transitions. They're very complex. Also the change management piece and the business process piece. It's more than modernizing a system. We have legacy business processes and forms and templates that also need to be transformed in workflows. But we often forget about that, and we just want to replace the system. So we're not trying not to do that. We're trying to emphasize on the data, the workflows, the business processes in conjunction with replacing the systems. That's a challenge, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
I'm just going to tee up one more question for you, and then we're happy to open it to the audience if any of you have questions for Bill. Anything you need from our nation's capital as you look at the work you're doing here in Washington?
Well, I always want to save money, but that's an easy answer.
Did that.
Money with a purpose, though. We're finding, especially on the cyber side, with Homeland Security, we have a federal grant program now that will provide grants to local governments, especially rural governments and tribes, opportunities to improve your security posture. That's a great program. And we have a planning committee, and we're putting together a cyber plan and a process for that. Those types of programs, I think, are really important to continue. We're also trying to implement an innovation and legacy modernization fund, and the governor's budget has money for us in the next biennium, but we want to expand that and potentially use grants from the federal government to move into that fund so that we can move faster and accelerate innovation and modernization in the state. We're tied to 2-year biennial budget cycles, and that's slow when you're talking about technology. So we're finding ways to accelerate, like we did with COVID, that innovation mindset in government that you all need to do every day. And so that's really important.
Great. Questions for Bill?
Bill, you mentioned as an example the transition from legacy mainframes to Workday, I believe it's the vendor.
Yeah.
Do you have an overriding philosophy about what needs to be built by the state versus private enterprise? How and when do you partner with external parties?
That's a great question. I do have a philosophy on that. We're all in on moving to the cloud. And when you're talking about the cloud, there's things that are really important, which is if we're going to move faster and not take 10 years to modernize, then we have to adapt our business processes to the systems, those software as a service systems that are available, right? And a lot of times what we do in government is say, well, we're special. Our business process or workflow is unique to us, when in fact we can change it. So if we can move to configurable software systems that don't require customization, we're much better off. And then we have to architect those so that we're integrating data, because those won't stand alone. We're integrating data across the enterprise as well. But it's moving to the cloud, it's moving to software as a service configurable systems, and not building applications from scratch, which we've done way too much over the years.
Any other questions, or should we get to our panel? Go ahead.
Yeah, a question. So you talk about those ancient mainframe systems that the government had, that the state has, and you talk about change management. How do you get our IT systems so they're more than just a snapshot in time, but they're continually evolving, instead of getting to a point where now it's a crisis and we have to jam to get brought up to current technology?
Yeah, that's another great comment question. So the systems that we're moving to, these cloud systems, they're platforms that constantly change versus systems that were locked into mainframes and then they become outdated. So all of these SaaS systems are on platforms that should be sustainable and change over time. It's not to say that some won't become obsolete, but by moving to the cloud, moving to these more modern platforms, and then through the agile process of constantly updating these every so often, which is happening, we shouldn't run into this type of crisis. Now, we have to choose wisely in doing that, because not every vendor is as credible as the next. But that's really what we're trying to do: is move to the cloud, move to software as a service, move to platforms that constantly update, so that we don't have the crisis that we have today around these mainframe systems.
I actually have one question as well, Bill. We hosted a digital transformation summit in DC about a month ago, and Congressman, thank you for attending and speaking at that. But one of the things we heard from both federal agencies and even some of the state CIOs is retaining talent. How do we retain talent, on a federal or a state agency level or even local level? Because there's a lot of temptation to go to the private sector after being in state government for a bit. How do we make sure that we're getting the talent pipeline we need to continue to modernize our government systems?
Well, I can answer that question because it's a problem. But so here's my philosophy on that. I sit on our state HR board as well. I co-chair with our state HR director, and I fully believe this. Right? How does the private sector retain talent? Which we've got to do. We've got to be flexible. We can no longer say, come on in and work on mainframes, and oh, by the way, you got to be in the office 5 days a week. Right? It's not going to fly. We're not going to not only retain the talent, we're not going to get the applicant pool we need. So what I'm trying to do is be much more flexible, not requiring, PhDs for certain jobs or even college degrees. Really looking at this from a whole different lens in how we recruit, and then leaning in much more into high schools, community colleges, technical colleges, universities, and getting that pool early. Because what I found is that, money's an issue, but if we can provide flexibility, stability, and professional growth, we have to do a much better job on that. Then we will have a much better job, or we'll do a much better job in retention and getting talent into the state. There are people that want to work in government. And a lot of times we don't think that, but when you talk to them, it's like, I want to make a difference in my community. But I don't want to work on 30-year-old technology. So we have to make sure there's opportunities to grow people. And then if they leave for the private sector, that's fine, but we can still get 3, 4, 5 years out of that.
I just wanted to kind of, what was your name again? Sorry, Jordan?
Jordan.
Hi, I'm Taryn. I'm a local resident. I'm also a small business owner for a record label that I'm trying to expand in Tacoma area. I just kind of wanted to expand on your question when you were talking about just retention and those types of strategies. What kind of communities are you guys kind of going into when you're talking about retaining talent or trying to approach those, approach different types of people? Because I know that community colleges and education systems don't also look at the other population that are not able to be in those facilities. And then also, are you guys working with like WorkSource Central or just like those types of entities that are trying to help people that are in survival mode right now?
Yes, we need to do a better job. So we have a very active diversity, equity, and inclusion program. And we're trying to expand our recruitments and lower the requirements and get into communities, especially communities of color, so that we can reach a different demographic than we have in the past. But I'm not going to tell you that we're where we need to be. We're trying to use LinkedIn and some other more creative ways to reach our applicant pool, but we really need to get out into communities. So job fairs, the WorkSource, we're leaning into that. We're going out to military as well. So those that are getting discharged and trying to recruit there, we're having good luck there. But that's a process we need to continue to improve on.
And are you guys considering, like, just with the increased use of cannabis, like those types of laws and everything, because those also prevent people from wanting to apply for those types of positions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. But keep us honest on this.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
So you were mentioning resources. I think you did answer my first question was it whether did you guys have issue with human resource? I think you answered that. And so infrastructure, how is that looking? Are you guys needing those resources as well? And if so, who are you guys currently outsourcing that to, like Amazon or Microsoft? What do you guys have in-house?
Yeah, so we have both. We have a data center where we have on-premise, so like servers and our network team as well. But more and more, that's moving to the cloud. So those jobs, the legislature gave us some funding last biennium to work with our employees to transition them from more on-premise type infrastructure to the cloud. So we're working on that as well, and that program's in my agency. But we have both. We're in what we call a hybrid environment where we're always going to have some on-premise. It's decreasing, and we have a lot of empty data halls in our data center right now. So hey, that's another thing. If you need a data center space, come talk to me.
We're going to talk about the importance of technology for small businesses. So maybe what I can go and do is go down the line. Matt, we'll start with you and tell everyone about your business and what got you into it.
We are a manufacturing business. We make beer, and the beer is made on Vashon Island, which is you have to take a boat to get to, which is how I got here today, obviously. And so we brew and sell in 2 retail locations, one on Vashon, and we opened up a space in Tacoma about 1.5 years ago. Technology is, we use it to drive sales. And actually, our Uber rep, Allison, is Allison here by any chance? She might be here now. She's on her way. She called me and asked if I wanted to be on the panel, which
She had to get an Uber.
Pardon?
She had to get an Uber.
Exactly. And so I think it shows the possibility of partnership between a small business and a technology company that they're doing a really great job of putting together. So.
See it?
Hi, my name is Syed. I run an edtech platform called Ecology. Before this, I was working for the State Department, and my job was to help US universities recruit international students. And one of the things I noticed is that so many of these students who are going to these really cool, fancy universities are graduating and not doing very well. They're not getting the job that they want. They're in student debt. Student debt, I read yesterday, is over $1 trillion now. It's reaching $2 trillion. And that really bothered us. We're working with students and helping them go to college, and they graduate and they're not happy. So that's what created Ecology. It's a platform that helps students do projects. We want them to see their careers and their higher education options 3 feet away instead of 30,000 feet away. So see very clearly what it is, know the dominant realities, and then go to college fully prepared or choose not to go to college and find alternative ways. And I was just thinking, what is it that we don't use technology for? There's nothing. We recruit mentors using technology. We do our online events using APIs. All our students do their projects online, our accounting, everything. I mean, we are really totally, completely dependent on technology. And one other thing I was thinking just a few days ago, talking to my team, is that we have 4-member team, and our closest competitor has 200 team members, and on some of the programs we are pretty neck to neck, and that would not have been possible without technology. I think that's just the beauty of it. It's so it levels the play field so much. In many traditional ways we are small, but if you look at the programs and impact, we are not small. We work in 7 countries. We have our global mentor cohort is in 15 countries. Every week we add 2 or 3 countries. And this would not have been possible without technology.
Vimbai, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your company does.
My name is Vimbai. I hope you will understand my accent. I still have my African accent. So on January 4th, 2014, I escaped from an abusive relationship. I had to flee Zimbabwe and move to Tanzania with my then 6-month-old daughter. So when I moved to Tanzania, I realized that a lot of women continue being in abusive relationships because they cannot take care of themselves. They don't have the financial means to be able to live and be financially independent. And I also realized that a lot of women, especially in developing countries, they die in these relationships. So I decided to start a small business which helps women to tell their stories of survival through the work of their hands. So we provide skills training and we provide material, and I do product design. So far, we are working with women in Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Kenya, in Tanzania, and we also have a group of women in Turkey, and I'm trying to start the same program here in Washington State. I started this business while I was still in Tanzania, and when I moved to PLAB in 2017, I continued with my mission, and I'm trying to start the same program here. And so far, I have 3 women I'm working with here in the Tacoma area.
A wonderful story, I think, of what you're trying to do to really help give a voice and education to people who really need help. Really powerful story. I think once again, kind of going back to talk about how tech really helps amplify what you do. Vimbai, can you tell us a little bit about how technology has helped you reach those who've been victims of domestic violence and getting them into your community?
Okay, so when I moved here, I launched my business during COVID, and I didn't have any face-to-face interaction with the customers, but being on Facebook and Instagram and doing Facebook ads, it just really helped me connect with people who share my values and who love to support my mission. I've also used Instagram, especially Instagram, for product research to see what's trending and what can these women make, which colors. Because I'm African, I love bright colors. I love wearing red, yellows, and everything floral. And when I started like that, I realized that most people were not receptive of it. They loved the products, but they just didn't see themselves wearing a red necklace or wearing a yellow dress. So Instagram is really, helped me to, understand the American market and what people, resonate with. And that has really helped with, product design and product development. I'm also using, I'm using QuickBooks for my accounting, and I've started doing vendor events, and I'm using Square. And I also, for things like that I don't understand, I'm using Fiverr, and I'm also using Google, Pinterest, and Facebook. And most of my, because I'm I'm doing everything on my own apart from a little help from my husband and my daughter. I've managed to use technology to automate most of my process through Shopify, and WhatsApp has really helped me to connect with the artisans, at a very in a cost-effective way, because I can do a video call with the artisans in Turkey or in Zimbabwe, for free.
See it.
A lot of everything that you said, it echoes very strongly. Teenagers are more depressed than ever. The depression rate among the teenagers is just skyrocketing. Suicide rates are going up every year. So when we work with students, one of the things we want to do is to immediately connect them to a peer mentor or a professional mentor, somebody who can just listen to them and just open that safe space. And Vimai said WhatsApp, we use WhatsApp extensively. Every day, WhatsApp day for us. So when we work with a student and we feel that the student is feeling any kind of depression or is likely to get depressed, we immediately find a peer mentor, create a WhatsApp group and say, hey, talk. And we just immediately see the result. Within 24 hours, we can see there are 15, 30 messages being exchanged. And they agree on a project to do it, and they start doing the project. But this is just one way where we address a very large problem that pretty much outside of our domain. We're not mental health experts. We're just using technology as a communication channel, connecting them, or letting counselors know. We work very closely with high school counselors in 6-7 countries. And a lot of time, these kids don't open up to their counselors or open up to their parents, but they do open up to their peer mentor because they say things that they feel that they are better understood. And we can see that on the group. A lot of time some of those things are very alarming. And so we let the counselors know, we often let the parents know, and then get on a call with them. And the entire communication happens through technology. You call me. We're actually building a new API on our website to do all our live events on our website instead of doing it on third party. So it's all technology, but this is a little bit more tight. Similarly, when we work with universities, the university system in the US particularly has created this insane amount of debt on students. And young people in debt, that's just obscene to me. And when young people are in debt, it breaks their back. And when 24-year-old, 23-year-old is in debt, they stop taking risks. They don't experiment. They don't explore. They lose confidence. They take the first job that comes their way, and they lose their potential. And country loses. The nation becomes weaker because more and more young people are just doing things that's not meeting their potential. And we are able to address it. It's easier for us to find out this and immediately relate to our university partners. And that improves their system. Adelphi University, one of our partners in New York, has recently come up with a new program in which they guarantee transfer student $10,000 or less tuition. A few other colleges have signed up with us, offering 100% tuition scholarship to our students if they participate in one of the competitions. So it's hard for me to go to a university and say your tuition is very high, lower it. They're not going to listen to me as a small business. But as a very small business, I can create a program, put it in front of the really giant organization and say, if you participate in this, we will promote you, we will put you in front of several high school counselors who are important stakeholders, but in return, we want them that you reduce your tuition for our children. They can't do it for everybody, but they can do it for us. With that negotiation power that we get, it would not have been possible if we did not have technology.
I think we've heard so many different types of tech already, things like payment apps, Instagram, social media, WhatsApp. Matt, I know I want to focus a little bit more on things like delivery apps as well too. I know the last few years have not been the easiest in the restaurant and brewery community just because of COVID issues and lockdowns and things like that. Can you tell me, Matt, a little bit about how things like delivery app tech has really helped your business?
Being on Vashon, we didn't use any delivery app services because there's no drivers, and so people just go to where they want to go. But once we moved to Tacoma, it took a few months to get our sea legs, but then we started with Square as our online ordering platform, and they use DoorDash or Uber, depending on, there's a bidding process, but usually DoorDash wins it. And then we did open up to DoorDash and Uber. I mean, it's, probably 5 to 7% of our monthly sales. And, so if we didn't have those, we would notice it. The issue is, for our staff is to see the overall benefit for the business to use those apps. Unfortunately, our employees don't get the tips from those third-party apps, and so I have to sell them on the importance of our whole entire company benefiting from 5 to 7% more top-line sales, even though they don't get the tips from it. And so when they're on board, we have 35 employees. And we have a really great retention rate. People stick around. I pay them really well. And whatever they need to do, whenever they need to do it, they go do it. No questions asked. And if we can't find somebody to cover the shift, then I do it. And I think we create a lot of trust with each other that way. And so they don't turn the services off, even when it's busy, which is the tendency for delivery apps. It's easy to turn off if they want. They have the keys to be able to do that. So they don't do it, and you make more money. So. And then I can pay them more, that is the goal.
Which is the most important.
It absolutely is. And one other piece of technology that wasn't said earlier that we use is Slack. It was a request from a staff member, and so I think in a similar way they can communicate with each other and have their their voices heard in a company-wide setting, and so we have shout outs, we have issues that need to be fixed, there's so many things from maintenance to periodic maintenance to things that have gotten low on an item or something. We have a lot of processes in place to make sure we don't run out of stuff, and it just allows things to not slip through the cracks. But my favorite part of it is the shout outs when employees are recognizing somebody on Vashon, and then Tacoma gets to see that type of interaction. And so it really has allowed us to be a lot more of a transparent company that they're creating the transparency, not me.
That's so cool.
It's been great.
I think obviously it wouldn't be a U.S. chamber or a chamber conversation without a conversation called policy. And how do we get good policies right to make sure that these small businesses can reap the benefits of tech. And we've seen a couple areas where, for example, delivery apps have been targeted for regulation where potentially competitors are not. We've also seen an issue pop up recently when it comes to things like data privacy, where either if you have a bill in Congress that overregulates, it could really cut off the ability to do things like targeted advertising or data analytics to help run your business. Or the other side of the coin is if you have a patchwork of state laws and you're a small business and you're trying to figure out how do I compete with Washington, comply with a new bill in Washington, for example, and compete, trying to comply with this new Utah bill or the new Virginia legislation or the California law. So really is a balance in terms of getting a a good privacy policy right. And there was actually a report that came out of ITI that showed that if we have a state privacy patchwork and not a truly national privacy bill, then that's going to cost small businesses $200 billion in compliance alone over the next 10 years. But let's say we don't get those policies right on things like privacy, or we unfairly target certain technology against other types of businesses. What would that do to your business if that happened? And Dubai, I'll start with you.
I think it has already happened, and I see that a lot of regulation, especially towards data privacy, is already really affected my business. I'll give you like my personal story. I have a son. He was born at Tacoma General. He's a 29 weeks preemie, and he has a lot of developmental issues, and is severely autistic. And before the iOS update, I was able to do ads on Facebook and Instagram. Like I'd spend $50 per day, and I would get sales of more than $1,000. And after the iOS update, I'm not able to spend the same amount and get the same return. So it's just been like a loss of money for me to advertise, because I cannot, you cannot target, effectively, and it has really affected my returns to the extent that I have to do vendor events. And I don't really like doing vendor events. Yes, it's a great way to connect with people, face to face. But like taking my son along with me to all these events is really difficult. So I would say data-driven advertising is very important for small businesses, and having these regulations and privacy laws have really affected a lot of these small businesses in our communities. And I am a member of the Meta Leadership Network, and if it's the same thing that you see, everyone talking about how they're losing money in advertising. And now we have TikTok, and I have to learn to do all the viral dances, to get to connect to customers. I'm in my mid-40s, and I'm thinking, okay, I have to, master all these trends. And so I think if there's something that can be done in terms of data privacy regulation that can help small businesses, it would help a lot.
Matter say it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, very similar opinion. TikTok, for example, is such a popular platform amongst teenagers. They have learned it. It just speaks their language. They are able to express themselves. India, where my co-founder is, Indian government is banned. Like this blanket ban, it takes away a way to express. It's not just a technology, but it's a way in which young people express themselves, and they have gotten used to express themselves, not just in the form, but also in a certain content. And you take away that, and that really creates a wall. They don't talk anymore. They don't communicate. They're not able to express, and that has a direct correlation on the depression levels and all kind of misinformed decision making. So it really affects. It absolutely affects. It derails our business. Any kind of, and I think regulation. I'm all for regulation, but I think a lot of regulation is very blanket, and that's what the previous panel was discussing. This the gap between how government operates and how private citizens are embracing technology and the speed with which there's a huge gap. And if we don't fill that gap, the easier thing for regulators to do is to just put a blanket ban and will not use it. So I think that must not happen. It's all very contextualized, it's all very nuanced. Putting a blanket ban on anything or over-regulating certain things that has a very direct impact on how small businesses operate. It really derails it. It's just, it takes us back to the square one. So much of our work that we have done, we have built community, like you talked about Slack, our whole team sits on Slack all the time. So it's really not possible for us to do day-to-day work if we don't use Slack. You ban Slack means you have really blocked our communications. all our messages are there. And it's not just those messages, it's also the way we communicate. We are used to tagging, we use certain kind of videos, we use video messages. Now for a new platform to create all of that, that'll take forever. It needs a behavior change. Then as a team, we have to sit down and say, oh, now we can't tag you. It really derails the communication. It just completely takes us off the productivity line.
We're maybe in a different situation because we are brick and mortar, and we do a lot to do word of mouth marketing and advertising, and so we get a lot of people coming because there's these little free slice pizza, wooden nickels and boxes. We have a pizza referral program where if 20 people come in and say, Saeed sent me, then they get a free pizza, and Saeed sends 20 people and he gets a free pizza party. And I think kind of what was in the earlier panel about how do we innovate when the forces around us reduce or eliminate how we used to communicate with our customers. And while I certainly don't want regulation to take or make it more difficult for delivery apps to work, I'm also a big fan of security and data security, and so having things black and white would say that the web blanket's going to eliminate our ability to reach customers. But what else can you do from this area that to reach your customers if targeted advertising isn't working? And sometimes that pressure allows us to think more creatively and do something different where you get to own it, as opposed to using geographic targeted spaces that that Google assigns. I'm just leery of that anyway, and I pull back from that because I want to be in control. I don't want to have to use their systems. I'll use mine. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we support at the U.S. Chamber is a strong national privacy law, but one that works for all businesses. Even if you have a carve out for, say, a small business who's not directly regulated, I think there is a concern that if the tools that some larger companies develop are hindered, then small businesses downstream don't reap the benefits of that technology. I think that's a concern that we have on the part of the national business community organization. We're actually happy to work with small businesses, including you all too as well. We're working on things like op-eds and things like that to really push on Washington to get a national privacy law done. I offer that as an invite to anyone who has an interest in doing that going forward. I think we have time for one more question for the panel. What type of tech excites you that you want to use in your business that you're not using now? And also, Matt, bonus question, what's the best beer and what's the best pizza you have?
Yes. When I was starting the business, we were doing our operating agreement with attorneys, and I would insist that even if I had to pay them extra to talk about the beer that they had recently that they're excited about, we were going to talk about beer. I think the tech that I want to employ and then never do is sort of a business management where I can have something magically help me with not only just inventory and profit, but also help drive decisions on how we run our business. And I know that we're not at an enterprise level, and there's stuff like that that's out there, and it's whenever I look at that, we're just not there. And so I end up using different conglomeration of different apps to get that done. Square, QuickBooks, data spreadsheet or Google spreadsheets, and then we make decisions based on that. But so enterprise software that was like enterprise light, I guess would be. And then honestly, the jam right now is just a straight ahead. We do an Italian Pilsner, which is kind of a new style. It's a all Pilsner malt with a dry hopping, and so you get like a really nice crisp plain beer with a little bit of lemony sort of finish on that dry hop pilsner with a slice of cheese pizza. You cannot go wrong. Seriously. Yeah.
And by the way, there are promotional tips that
Yeah,
you
I
have
did. Yeah, there's
out
some
front
out
there
there.
as well.
Thanks
so.
for giving me an opportunity to talk about Pizza and beer. A little sheepish up to next to these two that are doing the good work in the world. Although I do feel like so many, and I think Bill talked about this too. So much it happens from brick and mortars and retail businesses that help employees. We have such a wide array of employees. A number that are sober and that are living in sober houses and just need to get to the 3-month mark of employment so that they can leave the sober house. And I just take a lot of pride in working with folks that are on the edge and paying them well, getting them a steady schedule, not messing with their schedule around so that they know that they can rely on what I have to offer. So that's the thing that I'm most proud about our business.
No, that's excellent. And I think both Vibaya and Matt, I think really working, to use your business, but it also helps other people in ways that are not just about promoting the business, but getting people out of tough situations, like you said, in both cases. So I really, really applaud you all for that. And also beer and pizza.
And also beer and pizza.
Say it.
And red necklaces.
So one of the technologies that I personally like very much, and it has really echoed strongly with our audiences, are live events. So we have traditionally used Zoom and AirMeet. Now we are building a technology where we can host our conference. We do 10 to 12 live conferences every year. And these conferences attract anywhere between 200 to 1,200 people. They're often 1 day long, sometimes they're 5 days long. These are live events. Some of these are offline also, but we have traditionally been using Zoom and AirMeet, but now we want to build through API a way for us to host our events on our website. We don't have to go elsewhere, people can come there. And normally when events happen, it's a very manual process. So let's say if you record a Zoom session or event, and the session gets over, it sits on Zoom. So you have to download it, send it to your editor, edit it, re-upload it, then reshare it. It's a lot of process. We want to cut down all of that. We just do it on our platform, and once it's recorded, it just sits there as it is. If you want to edit it, it's okay if there are some pauses here and there, and if there are some don't want to take it and I'll let editors normally do it. I think that what I'm hearing from our young people is that they don't mind it. They think that adds authenticity. They don't want slick videos anymore. They like, no, it looks more natural. It's okay. So that's what I'm very excited to do all of live events on ours.
I'm most excited about the metaverse. I'm really looking forward to building a shop in the metaverse and for my customers to connect with artisans in Africa and see what they are doing, the production process, their lives there. And I think it would be pretty cool for people to experience that and see how things are over there and understand how much it is important for them to support businesses like mine. And I'm also excited about ChatGPT. It has really helped me with my SEO and keyword research and product description. Still, I have to revise and do all that. But if you use it, it's really it's really helpful. It makes your life a little bit easier. And I am looking forward to a technology that can stop the algorithm from constantly changing.
Well, I think we have time for one quick question because I know the congressman has a hard stop, so I want to make sure we get him in. But I'll take a question right here.
I'll try to make it quick. Thanks, Jordan. Matt, I don't envy you going into a market of of brewing in this area, so that's a very brave thing. Saeed, you seem to be doing the right thing for the right reason. I appreciate that. Bimba, I think you're very brave for what you've done and for what you turned it into, but also your accent is beautiful. You don't have to change it. Just leave it the way it is.
Thank you.
That's on us, not on you. So I want to piggyback a little bit on what Tara was talking about. So Miss Tara, she was talking about basically what I wanted to talk about, access. So there is a lot of peacocking about opportunity from the federal all the way down. The problem isn't the opportunities you create on paper. The problem is access to those opportunities and the gates that are in between it. You're going to have problems where there's a lot of, BIPOC situations or people of color or minorities, and people like me that are disabled. There's another one that never gets thought of, and it's poor. Just because somebody's poor, and you don't have to have no money to be poor. The easiest way you can explain this is credit score. So in the last 4 years, I have the only actual virtual technology in the city. We write VR software. I have multiple VR patents, all filed on my own. I could not get a single loan from a bank, a friend, or anybody else because nobody understands technology, and it's hard to be first, but we are. And in that time, we've gone from multiple patents, multiple products, me designing all this stuff in an attic. I've upgraded to a garage. But this weekend, I'm going to GDC in San Francisco. We've got 5 different products that are portfolioed for pitch between $250,000 and $12 million. No support. Federal, state, city, none. Got the runaround, and I wasn't even allowed to apply for SBA loans because my bank said my credit score was too low. How are you supposed to compete with that? So you can create all the access that you want. And I love hearing about your situations, but ultimately, what you're talking about has no bearing on me being here. It's about what worked for you, and you talking about Uber, that's great, but I get nothing from that. I can commend you, but when I walk out of here, I need to be able to put me and my employees and my future in a better position. And that's where you come in. And that's the problem. The problem is creating all of this opportunity and talking about it and parading it around. But somebody goes up, nobody bases stuff on this. This is a business plan. It's 100 pages because I'm crazy. Nobody wants to listen to 150 pages. But I did it because I was always taught you have a good business plan, that's where the money comes. Not anymore. They didn't give a shit. They don't care. It was all about a credit score. Well, you need a down payment. Well, I'm poor. I sold everything I own in 3 months. Came with 10 grand, which was 10% of what they asked for. Was another thing. Well, you need to have this. Okay, went and completed that. And then you do all of that after being strung along. I got an example from Umpqua Bank, which is a local bank. After 8 months of stringing me along with, yeah, we can do this. Let's even try to help you with the grant. Well, I know these people. Let's make these connections. I was told finally on the phone, I said, what is going on? He goes, I was like, I just want a new business loan. He goes, I can't give you that. And I said, look, that's what we've been talking about this whole time. And he goes, I was like, what's the criteria? And he finally admits, he goes, you have to have 3 years of positive revenue in your business checking account before we will consider giving you a new loan. So the explanation was, I have to be successful in business for 3 years before they will give me a loan to start the business.
Well, and I think it's definitely an issue.
How can they get community lending? How can you get FDIC insurance if your job is to community lend? That's part of the agreement, and you're not lending to community based on products or plans, just on
You
numbers.
bring up a very good point about having access to capital.
When I think about that through the realm of, through the lens of being a policymaker, part of my goal was to make sure that we are providing tools to help people navigate that economic change rather than to be victimized by it. And so a lot of what we're talking about today, a lot of the work that the U.S. Chamber does is really about empowering employers to create new jobs and provide new opportunities, and empowering workers to navigate that change. The efforts that it has undertaken on workforce development in particular is a great example of that. And I want to say a little bit about that, because technology can be an extraordinary driver of economic opportunity as well. You look here in Tacoma, we have cutting edge medical institutions that are growing jobs like gangbusters and are hungry to find people with skills in science, technology, engineering, and math. We met with Multicare just yesterday, and they've got masses of open positions. We have industry-leading manufacturers in this community, many of which are really geared towards technology. We have professional services firms and financial services firms that have a lot of open positions, often in spaces that require knowledge around IT. We have cybersecurity firms, including Infoblox here in downtown Tacoma, that is just growing gangbusters, and it's an awesome success story. And so, through that lens, part of our goal, part of all of our goal ought to be, how do we support that ecosystem? How do we make sure that we're growing and keeping those jobs? That's our local challenge. We have a national challenge too. We know that the technology sector is a growing sector. We know that on average, those technology jobs pay more than other private sector jobs. We also know that the technology industry is a massive contributor to global trade. So all of these are things that sort of behoove us from a national policy standpoint. So I think one of the questions that I ask as a guy who gets on a plane every week to fly to Washington, D.C. is, so what can the federal government do to help? Well, we've heard about some of those things already today. The infrastructure law is an example of something the federal government can do to help. That bipartisan infrastructure law really focuses on closing the digital divide. One of the things that we learned over the last few years is access to the internet is not just about whether you can watch season 3 of The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, which you should because it's awesome so far. But it's about whether you can have a telehealth visit, or whether you can take an online class, or whether you can grow your business and have a job. And for a lot of folks that can't. The district I represent is in the bottom third of the country when it comes to access to high-speed internet. So the passage of that bipartisan infrastructure law and the fact that that law is going to close the digital divide, that is a big deal. It is really significant. You're going to start to see those funds flow more significantly here in the months ahead. On top of that, the federal government can be a partner when it comes to trying to deal with our workforce gap. We know that we have people in this country who need jobs, and we know that we have a lot of jobs that need people. More and more of those open positions are in the areas of science, technology, engineering, and math. And we are expected to have more than 1 million open computing jobs next year. 1 million open jobs. And so the work that we do around workforce development, trying to provide pathways to people studying science, technology, engineering, and math, and particularly studying computer science, trying to support new avenues to going into those fields really matters. It is a problem that if you look at who is taking the advanced placement exams in computer science, it is disproportionately white and disproportionately male. And so trying to provide some new avenues to young people to be able to pursue those careers needs to be part of the solution as well. And part of the way government can help is as a user of technology. And I want to sort of end with that. I was asked to mostly speak about the work of the Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress. You may have noticed I didn't do that. But I want to end by talking about that, because that was a big part of what our committee was focused on, was how Congress uses technology. And I want to give you some examples of things that we're trying to fix. So as an example, right now, if you call my office, which is 9 floors up, with the issue with the VA, or an issue with Social Security, or an issue with the Small Business Administration, we have caseworkers who will help you navigate that issue with the federal agency. There are 434 other members of Congress who have similar systems in place that will help you with casework. Now, here's a problem. We may get 3 people with the exact same problem with the VA. There are probably 434 other offices that are getting 3 or 5 or 10 of the exact same problem with the VA. But guess what? There is currently not in place a system that aggregates that information in a private way that protects your privacy, but that can identify systemic problems. Instead, each office, each of these 435 House offices, is playing whack-a-mole with these individual cases, the 3 or 5 or 10, when we have a systemic problem. So one of the recommendations we made was fix that. Create a system that would aggregate that data, enable Congress to identify these systemic problems. We have, to quote the beginning of the TV show, The $6 Million Man, we have the technology, we know how to fix it, right? We can do this in a way that's pretty simple and that would drive a lot of impact for the American people. Let me give you another example. How many of you have ever watched a congressional hearing on C-SPAN? All right, y'all have too much time on your hands. But one thing you'll notice is that oftentimes it looks like nobody's there. And it's not because members of Congress aren't doing their job. It's because members of Congress are usually in 3 hearings at the same time. Just to give you a sense of it, next Thursday, I'm going to, at the same time, be in the Defense Subcommittee hearing from General Milley. At the same time, I'm in the Energy and Water Appropriations Subcommittee hearing from the Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm. And at the same time, I'm in the Interior and Environment Subcommittee hearing from the head of the Forest Service. All at the same time. You may find yourself thinking, hasn't every high school and college in America figured out how to deconflict the schedule? And you would be right. So one of our recommendations was, hey, again, we have the technology rather than, like, my clone does not show up for work. And I'm not saying this to say it's frustrating for me as a member of Congress, though it is. It's frustrating to the American people when Congress is dysfunctional.
Yes.
When the work of committees in Congress is a crap show, pardon the expression, but when committees are supposed to be the place where members of Congress are learning about issues, developing knowledge, and solving problems together. And instead, because members of Congress are in 3 committees at the same time, what it ends up being is a place where members of Congress parachute in, give a 5-minute speech that they can show on social media, and then peace out to run to their other committee. That's a problem because it contributes to the dysfunction. This is a great example of where we can use technology to solve a problem, not just for Congress, but for the American people. Make sense? So let me give you another example. Some of what we had to change was related to COVID. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that required literally physical copies. So when you filed a bill, you literally had to go stick a hard copy bill into the hopper. Committees were required to transmit committee reports in hard copy. Wet signatures were required on nearly everything. And necessity is the mother of invention. Congress said, hey, well, that's probably dumb. We have the technology that can allow for using technology to transmit all of these things. So that change was made, and to the credit of folks in Congress, they said, hey, that worked. Nothing went wrong there. Let's keep doing that, even though we can now still show up in person and drop a bill in the hopper, but we don't have to because we have technology. We're looking at some other things too. So for example, how many of you know that you can purchase an American flag from a congressional office? All right, you can buy a flag that's flown over the United States Capitol from a congressional office. Oftentimes people do it for a funeral. They have a veteran who's passed away, they want to get a flag flown in their honor. How many of you have ever ordered Domino's pizza? Did you know that you can actually see where your pizza is in process and how far it is on your way? Why not do that with casework or with congressional flags or something like that, so that if you got a funeral coming up, you're not sweating whether or not your flag's going to show up. So one of our recommendations was use technology to provide that sort of transparency around information, not just for American flags, but for other stuff too, so that our constituents have some insight into how government is working. And if it's not, they're able to say, hey, I need some help here. Can you expedite that? Final thing I'll just mention is we're also looking at how to make the federal government more responsive. So this is a little bit of a controversial recommendation, but it is one that passed from our committee. And that was to Yelpify some of the work of Congress, to actually provide a mechanism for feedback so that people can say, hey, this is working or this isn't working. I actually think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, just as a taxpayer, there are certainly some times where I interact with government agencies where I'm like, I would like to provide some feedback about how this could work a little bit better. How many would like to do that? Yeah, I bet you would. So these are some recommendations that we've made. Now, I shared this with you. Historically, these select committees do nothing. In modern history, most of them have made 0 recommendations. Literally, you can go back to the 90s and there's not a select committee that has passed any recommendations. There was one on budget appropriations and budget appropriations process reform. It passed 0 recommendations. Why am I sharing this with you? Well, we did a lot of things differently in our committee to try to break the streak and actually have a committee that would be functional. Our committee passed 202 bipartisan recommendations. 40 of those recommendations have now been fully implemented. About 75 are in the process of implementation, and we're working to get the rest implemented. Because our goal was not to write a white paper that would get put up on a shelf. It was to actually make Congress work better for you. So I'm gonna stop there. I probably yammered on longer than you wanted me to, but I'm happy to take a few questions unless Courtney gives me the hook. So.
You got about 5 minutes.
Okay.
So that's a question.
Yeah, shoot.
As we talked about, going back to Bill Kehoe and the transition to the cloud that he talked about, I'm sure at the federal level, so many of these changes that you discussed, the more you have it. It seems that there's a tension between how capital intensive and how much compute power is required in these big shifts.
Yeah.
Tension with consolidation among a very few large companies.
Yeah.
And with both of those things being in your purview to some degree, do you agree it's a tension? And if so, how do you think about it?
Yeah, I think there's other tensions too. I think you're right. The other tensions are the federal government is frequently not at the cutting edge. The cloud doesn't seem to be cutting edge at this point, but for a lot of agencies, it still seems like voodoo. And so you've got some agencies that continue to push back on technology uptake. On top of that, the other issue that we face is making investments in back-end technology is not a sexy purchase. And so oftentimes, when we saw this at the state level too, I don't know if Bill Kehoe is still here, but when the state legislature, when a state agency said, hey, we would really like to get off of the 1960s mainframe, if you had a choice between doing that and making an investment that would be evident to your constituents, you're probably more likely to do that second thing. And so that has been an impediment to some of these back-end modernization efforts. There are other factors at play too. Some agencies are skittish about the use of the cloud for privacy purchases, but frankly, there are private businesses out there that have detailed medical information, detailed financial information. They have figured out the security of the cloud. So I think how the intelligence agencies uses the cloud. So some of those agencies that have been slow moving in that regard are starting to get religion. I'll probably take one more and then I got it.
I'll find you.
If
Go on.
nobody has a question, I'll ask. Yeah, you kind of touched on it a little bit, right? Just curious, does the committee or you have a approach or philosophy on balancing that push for accelerating the use of technology and also safeguarding the information, right? So balancing the adoption of more distributed compute power versus protecting confidentiality of the
100%. So what Congress did as part of this modernization effort was to propose, and it's already been implemented, the establishment of what they're calling the House Digital Service. And that is to have a group of smart technologists that are doing the vetting to try to do that balance, to thread that needle, to make sure that there's adequate protection of your personal information, but also that we're using cutting edge technology in a way that helps us communicate with our constituents better, solve problems better. The same thing is true with regard to the open data conversation that I had with Bill, right? It's very clear that all the things that are supposed to be private stay private. And at the same time, the federal government has to be better about creating, with the exception of those things that should be private, a presumption of openness, a presumption of accessible, machine readable, and available, so that if you're a business that wants to use government data to drive decision making, that you can do that and you don't have to navigate your way through some cache of PDF documents and pull out statistics, but rather have accessible, available, and machine readable data open to you. That's what government is not great at yet, but with the passage of that law, it's getting there.
Thank you.
You bet.
Congressman, thank you very
You
much.
bet. Thanks again, everybody.